Good afternoon. Welcome to Evolve Through God. My name is Angela Goodman, and I am really excited today to have our very first repeat episode 2 guest. You had no idea, did you? And I was going to tell you. So we've got Amanda Hietter back today, and she is here for a second time because we had so many things to talk about in our first episode that we didn't get to like the last 4 years of your life. So hopefully I'm going to put these back to back so people get to hear your story back to back. And so we left off, and you had just moved back to Missouri with your parents, and I'm gonna let you kind of steal the show. And welcome back.
Okay, so for anybody that had listened to the first podcast of this, I highly recommend, if you're hopping in with the second half, listen to that first half and check out Angela's other podcast, because the people that she has on there are just phenomenal. The stories that they share, it's just,
thank you.
That has really given you such an amazing voice to be able to share this with the world. So thank you, Angela. Okay, so hopping right back into the story. So I had just moved in with my parents in Missouri. I had went from Georgia all the way up to Missouri to where it's cold, and what I love to call Missouri, misery. I live in misery, but you know what? Sometimes God puts you through those trials to get you to a bigger and better place.
Yeah.
So moving in with my parents, as I had said before in the past podcast, they had established a lot of rules for me. So I moved in November of 2021, right before Thanksgiving, and things were a whirlwind during that point. I was still having a lot of withdrawals from being addicted to marijuana. So I remember that first month, food didn't taste right. I couldn't sleep. I was very restless. I was angry. I was sad. There were just so many emotions that I was feeling during that first month. And with it being the holiday time, making it even more complicated with being around family. So I remember that first Sunday that I went to church, and I could still remember sitting in Sunday school surrounded by people that were at least 20 age my senior, because the church my parents went to and dragged me along to was an older congregation. Okay. I remember sitting there and thinking, I hate this. Why am I here? I don't want to be here. And I was so angry and had this scowl on my face, and people would want to try to talk to me. I just had this look like
at this point you're in active withdrawal. So you are not actively using, but you are trying to actively stop using. And so withdrawal is no fun.
No, it's not. So going through these withdrawals, I remember a lot of anger. And so that first 6 months being with them, just over the holidays, there was a lot of anger. And I remember that a few nights I drank a lot of alcohol and got pretty inebriated at my parents' house. I would wait until after my parents would go off to bed, because they're older. They'd be in bed by 9:30, and I would go sneak into the kitchen and raid their liquor cabinet and would get so intoxicated. And I would just sit there and bawl my eyes out because I missed my husband. I missed my home. I missed the drugs, to be brutally honest.
Yeah.
Because it made me feel better, I thought, being on those drugs. And I was not allowed to have them in the home. My parents were very adamant of, you are not allowed. And they also told me if I violated any of these rules, that if I violated them even once, I was out. My son could stay, but I could not. They said, you're going to be living out of your car, ma'am. So I was like, okay, I got to at least follow those rules. So 6 months were really tough. The Lord really did work on my heart during that time. I did start reading my Bible a lot more. And that was when I started to pray, because when the Lord puts you in the bottom, deepest pit in the valley, and you really have nothing else to turn to but Him, and that's where He had put me, I started to pray. And as I started to pray, I started very simply of praying over my son, because he wasn't a believer at the time. And he was 14. And my daughter, Michelle, she accepted the Lord into her life when she was, I believe, 11. So I was a little worried that Braden would not ever accept the Lord. Now, mind you, my son he's on the autism spectrum. So I was really worried that maybe he was not ever going to connect the dots. So as I started praying over him and praying that he would understand that he needs God, he actually came to Christ during that 6 months of me living in my parents' house.
Do you know what caused that for him? Do you have an idea on why?
Yeah, I do. So obviously being around my parents, with them having such a strong background of just, my dad is very heavily into theology. So he can explain things, I guess more, I wouldn't say like on a dumber level, but he would have conversations with my son because he would start asking. So we went to church every Sunday finally. And the church I went to, the pastor every Sunday at the end of the service, he would go through what he called the ABCs. So admit, believe, confess. And which is very like easy to remember. And so that was reiterated every Sunday for almost 6 months while I was transitioning with living with my parents in my own place. So we were at dinner one night and my son said to me, Mom, I just want to let you know I accepted the Lord into my life with my parents there. And we were all like, what? And we said, well, when did you do this? He goes, oh, a couple days ago. He said, I just remember what the pastor said. And I just prayed in my room and asked the Lord into my life. And we just all started crying. We were so excited. He got baptized. And it was just, honestly, that was so freeing. And that, I think that at that point, when I look back, that was when I was like, okay, God, I really need to like start focusing on you more, because I have to do this for him and for me.
Yeah.
So I decided to become a member of the church as well, because I always scoffed at membership of churches. I'm like, it's like being a member of some society or something. Like, why should I have to do this? And it made me realize that the point of being a member of a church is really having that community and you being involved. And once you're a member, that's when you're really supposed to get involved with the church. So I started singing on the praise team and started doing other things in the church. Actually went on a missions trip about a year and a half later after starting to attend that church. And that was really kind of a cool thing to be in Panama and share and pray over people. That was something I've always was afraid of, is to pray out loud in front of people. And I know now, looking back, why. It was because I didn't have that real relationship with God. Because I think, as I said before on the previous podcast, prayer is not about us. It's about just talking to God and just being open and realizing, who cares what anybody thinks, even if I stumble over my words or stutter over my words. It's really about like telling God what's on your heart, even though he already knows.
Yeah.
But so that was really a cool experience for me. So to backtrack, about 6 months after living with my parents, I ended up moving into my own apartment. And during this time, I was still really struggling with my husband. We barely talked during this time. And so I started communicating with him a little bit more when I moved out on my own. And he had talked about coming to see me on my birthday. And I remember I told him no, I did not want him to come. And because I really kind of wrestled with it. Like, do I want to see him again? And I thought back to all my other birthdays of when we'd been together the last 8 years. He ruined every single one of my birthdays in some form of another, just random little things. And I was like, I want this year to actually be a good birthday. So I told him no. And that's when our relationship really just fell apart completely. Literally a couple weeks after my birthday, he sent me a video of him having intercourse with another woman.
Oh boy.
And that
what a lovely guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What a lovely guy.
I was sitting at work and I saw this come through and I was like, what is this? I clicked on it and I watched it. And when I watched it, like, I felt like I wasn't in my body. Like, was I dreaming?
Right.
And then my stupid self watched it again because I was like, no, there's no way. I was imagining that.
Yeah.
And with me, my background of being a paralegal for 15 years, that was the day that I was like, all right, it's time to file for divorce. So I started drafting up the divorce papers. I filed them myself, had them served on him. And the day that he got served with the papers, and we hadn't talked in probably a couple months at this point. By the time he got served, he actually texted me. And the only thing he texted me was, thank you. That was it. That was the only thing I got from him.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that video that he sent you was really a gift from God, in all honesty. Because in the mental state you were in, you might have tried to rekindle things with someone who would send that to you. And God was like, you know what, Amanda, let me help a sister out. Let me help a sister out.
I always say God loves to like, he doesn't give me little signs, or he probably does, and I just don't see them. He's like, let me
Probably.
smack you with a big plywood and knock
Yeah.
you down on the
Yeah, let
ground.
me give you one of these massive 25-foot wide or 25-yard wide billboards, Amanda. Let me give you
Yes,
that because that you will pay attention to.
exactly, exactly. And so during that time, this was when I was filing, it was like in about September, and it took about 2.5 months. So our divorce was finalized literally right at about a year from me separating from him. So that was around the holidays again. So the holidays were hard. I started picking up drinking again, and I actually turned back to THC. I was taking gummies to kind of cope with everything.
What year was this?
This was in 2022.
Okay.
So I'd filed for divorce at the end of, it was like end of August, beginning of September, somewhere around in there. And then the divorce was finalized in November of 2022. Like, I think it was the 18th. So right, like literally right at that 1 year mark of our separation. And Thanksgiving was coming up, and I was still so angry that year. I didn't, and I'm a person that loves to decorate my house, especially for Christmas and Easter, because it's about the Lord and I really want to celebrate it. And that year I think I put up one, like I had a tree that was like this big. It was a real tiny tree, and I put like 4 ornaments on it, and that was it. And my kids were kind of like, Mom, why didn't you decorate this year? And I was just like, I don't really feel like it. And I'm really depressed and was sad. And I was also still getting high almost every weekend on the THC gummies, and was drinking to cope. And that went on for, I would say, about another year. And I had a falling out with a church that I was in, the First Baptist church I was going to. There were some things that had happened with the church, with the leadership. And I decided to go to another church. It was an Acts 29 church called Genesis Church. And I was still feeling so lost, but I still had a relationship with God. I was still talking to him every day, reading the Bible, but I just didn't feel like I had a community. And honestly, the only way you can ever really hold yourself accountable with staying away from drugs and from staying away from addictions and things like that is having a community. So I decided to go to a church that was local. It was literally right down the road from my street, or from where I live. And I walked into the church. And when I walked in, the very first person that greeted me, and mind you, I've always sang on the praise team most of my life. Singing has just been in my blood since I was born because of my parents. First person that greeted me was the wife of the worship pastor. And she just was like, oh, hi, how are you? And she was explaining who she was. And I was like, okay, God, like this is really cool. And so then as the service was wonderful, the pastor came up and talked to me. And as I was leaving, I have always been wanting to be involved in missions. The person that I talked to as I was leaving was actually the head of the missions department, or the missions portion of the church. And I was like, okay, God, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so that was honestly so cool to have that. And that church has just been there for me through thick and thin and everything that I've been through ever since. And so as I was starting to draw back closer to God, I realized that I really did not have a true personal relationship with him. And I was not surrendering all to him. Like,
what is that you are missing? What is it you were missing?
I still was hanging on to my addictions of drinking and my addictions of THC. And I even struggled with addictions of porn, honestly. And that's something that's embarrassing for me to state, but I like to be very raw and real. And so struggling with all of those, even like I can even tell you still now, I still struggle with those. It's a never ending struggle. I'm never going to be like, oh, I don't crave that. Like the devil loves to get in your head and think you need it. So as I started going to this church and getting heavily involved and meeting the people there, God introduced me to a girl. Her name is Sam. And she became that person that really helped me grow my faith. She had been through a lot in her life. And when I started sharing my story, she encouraged me to start sharing it with the people in the church. So I talked to the ladies in the women's ministry and decided to share my story for the very first time. And this was about 1.5 years ago at a small women's event. And I was shaking. I was petrified. I had already written up my whole story because I wanted to be able to grieve
everything.
and
Yeah.
cope with all of that baggage. I knew I needed to put it on paper. And so I remember at this event, I walked in the doors at someone's house and there's all these women there and they're like, okay, we're going to eat some, like a brunch before we start. And I'm like shaking like this. I'm like, I couldn't even eat. I was like, I'm going to throw up. I don't want people to know all of these things about me, even though I'm an open person. It's kind of embarrassing to talk about being addicted to cocaine and marijuana and alcohol and, having drugs in and out of my house, like all of the, selling drugs at home, all the things. And as I started sharing my story, the love that I saw from these women of just like, there was zero judgment from everyone in the room. And I hadn't even been going to the church for that long, maybe 4 or 5 months. I was still very new. It was like, okay, this is really cool. Like, it's okay to share my story. And it's okay. And as I shared my story, other women that weren't going to share their story opened up and said, okay, I've been struggling with some of those same things. And they started sharing their struggles. And then I found out a good friend of mine, her story was so similar to mine. And we've bonded through that. Yeah. And so the Lord's really shown me that sharing my story, it's not about being embarrassed or talk or like making it about myself. It's not about that. It's who is it out there that I'm going to be able to help? Who is it that this story that God has turned all bad things into good? Romans 8:28, one of my favorite verses of all time. How my story is going to be used for others and to help draw them to him, because we're put on this earth to grow his kingdom. That's what we're here for. And so it just really opened my eyes. So I started sharing my story more and more and more. And I finally decided to break away from using THC gummies very shortly after that. I was still really struggling with take them every once in a while. And I finally broke away from that. And then I started to really notice that I was an alcoholic. Back in, so in November of 2023, I went to Mexico and I had eliminated alcohol from my life at that time, I thought. And so I went on this trip and was with all these friends, and I spent an extra night at a resort all by myself. And I was so lonely. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go down to the little bar where they're doing karaoke, because I love to sing. And I was like, oh, I'll just have one shot. Well, one shot turned into, I have no idea how many.
Oh boy.
And I kind of made some friends with some girls, and we decided to run down to the beach. So we ran on the beach, and she's like, let's be free and let's get naked and run at the beach. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like so inebriated, but I still remember all of this. So as I'm running down the beach, the tide is, going out. And so I stumbled and I fell, and then the wave started sucking me in.
Oh,
and
dang.
I was tumbling and tumbling and tumbling and tumbling. And I saw my life flash before my eyes of, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to die. And then as I was thinking this, a wave just spat me out onto the beach. And I was wearing glasses, and my glasses were gone. And I just started screaming come help me. I didn't know where the other girls were. So they came and helped me and got me back to the room. And I called my friend Sam from church the next morning. And I just cried to her. And I said, I cannot believe I just went from eliminating alcohol from my life to completely relapsing to where I lost my glasses. So I had to throw some contacts in my eyes. That's not a fun thing to travel with, is contacts in your eyes in an airplane. And so she prayed over me, and she really was that person that was like, I can help you get through this. So anytime I would have this thought of, okay, I want to overdrink, or I want to turn back to THC, she was that person for me that was like, no, you need to step away from that. And you remember what happened there, and you remember what happened there. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Right. Has she been through similar things in her life?
Honestly, no. Her life is so different than mine, but God placed in my life for a purpose. And
but that's awesome. I mean, that she can bring you to that place without a point of relation, right? Yeah. To your point, right? God is the point of relation. But in a lot of cases, we as humans are not as non-judgmental as we should be. And so when you don't have a point of relation with someone other than God, sometimes that gets things into trouble. So that's awesome that you found her and that she's been your rock there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She really has been. And
Yeah.
she's also an entrepreneur. So that's one thing that's really cool is as I was leaving my corporate world into full-time as a travel advisor, she was always kind of there, like guiding me and cheering me on. And she's an entrepreneur as well. So it's kind of fun to have someone that's in that world. And honestly, like I stayed far away from THC gummies for a long period of time until very recent. And this is where I know God is still working on me because my daughter actually recently got a new job as a flight attendant, and she moved from Missouri all the way out to Denver. And this was back at the beginning of February. And I'm the kind of person that thinks I can handle things. I'm not going to cry and I'm going to be good. And like, I can get through it. You know, I can do this. Well, that very first weekend after she left, I was on a girls' trip with some friends and I got so extremely inebriated that I blacked out. And like everyone was telling me the following day, all the crazy things I was doing. And I was like, okay, here we go again. And I was like, okay, we're not going to drink like that anymore. But then I was still hurting. And then I was one night after church. This is where the devil loves to get to you. It was one night after community group. I went straight over to the store and bought myself some THC gummies. And this was literally like about 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
I took like a fourth of a gummy. It was very small. And I felt great. I slept really well. In the morning, I couldn't get up. And then the next 3 days after that, I was so foggy, I couldn't even function and run my business. I thought, oh, I'm just sick. That has nothing to do with the gummy. So the next weekend, I took another fourth of a gummy, went through that again, where I had 4 days of just being so foggy. And I actually reached out to my sister and to my friend Sam and told them this. And they said, this is God showing you cannot have this in your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You got to be done.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, God, that I'm never touching those again, ever again, Lord. So it's still something I struggle with. But God had to really, like I said, knock me flat on my face of like, you can't even function. I had to cancel all of my calls with my clients, probably ruin some relationships with clients for all I know. Yeah. So I am still a work in progress, and it's always going to be a struggle because I have an addiction issue, and I know I do.
We're all a work in progress in our own way. And also identifying like what those triggers are for you that where you get triggered back into, I want to go do that. I want to go do that. I want to go do that. That's the big piece. That's the part you got to identify. What is that trigger that makes you want to have that? And then, talk to him, pray on it, say, God, why do I do this? Why do I do it? Why do I continue to do it? Help me release it. Give me the path to releasing it so that I can move forward in your service. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This past weekend was actually like a huge aha moment. And now I know why God wanted us to chat again, because I want to share this with whoever is listening, because it really was just like a duh moment, but a huge aha moment. Mm-hmm. How we are all born into sin and we always want to turn to sin. And so even with me, when I'm like feeling kind of down and turning towards unhealthy snacks. And the lady that was teaching, her name is Jessica Davis. She's a phenomenal person. She actually showed me that I should dive into theology because it's so important as a believer to have that theology background, to be able to really share why what we believe is the correct way, because there's so many religions out there. And one thing that she had said is that we always think that we can get satisfaction with like some alcoholic beverages, drugs, food, sex, whatever it might be. And you may get that satisfaction at that point when you're doing it. You may think you're getting it, but our hearts and our souls are so deep that we can never feel that satisfaction unless it's through Christ. And when she shared that, I was like, oh my gosh, because I've always like, oh, if I travel to like this place, I'm going to be so satisfied. Nope. I've been to many cool places. I never have had full satisfaction. If I drink, a couple alcoholic beverages and I feel good, that's going to satisfy me. Nope, never does. I wake up the next morning and still don't feel great. And so what she had said is, what if instead of scrolling social media just mindlessly, instead of using that downtime, we're using that time to get into the word and diving in here? or praying, getting on our knees and praying. And the more that we do that, the more satisfaction and wholeness we're going to feel, because Christ is the only one that can fill that deep, deep, deep longing that we have.
It's true.
And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. And so even like last night, I wanted to go get some alcoholic beverages because it had been kind of an easygoing day. And the first thing I thought is, no, I'm going to pray. And I stopped right then and there and I prayed and I said, Lord, help me to find full satisfaction in you, Jesus, because you are the only thing that is ever going to completely satisfy my soul.
Yep.
And it gave me peace as soon as I prayed that. And like, even the things I watch, like on Netflix, people don't even think about how you're watching something and they're cursing or they're having, sex, but you may not even see it, but they're not married. How those little tiny things can creep in and cause you to sin. And so I was watching this Netflix episode yesterday of this show and I turned it off because I just felt this like ick in my gut because they were smoking marijuana. And I was like, I can't watch that because I have an addiction. We're turning that off. I'm never watching that show again. So I turned on The House of David on Amazon Prime, which is about the story of David.
Yes.
And I would rather watch something like that that's going to draw me closer to God and bring the Bible to life. And so just little things like that. We don't even think how that could lead to a bigger sin, but it does. It really does.
Yeah, and it's amazing because what you also find is that all of that is subconscious. It's all subconscious. And to your point, we are all descendants of Adam and Eve. We were all impacted by the sin that long ago. And it subconsciously still exists in our psyche and in our mind and in our body and in our soul. And it is our job to correct it.
Yeah. You are so correct. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for being so vulnerable. You're always so vulnerable. It's so good. And I know that there are listeners who are listening and are like, oh, that's where I'm at. That's where I am literally right now. Yeah. I'm literally in that place. And Amanda's giving me hope that I'm not alone. And there are people who will love me no matter what I do. And there is a place in Christ to find to help me through what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
So thank you for being so vulnerable with that.
You're welcome. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. I'm still in work in progress. I'm going to struggle with
this. All of us are. We all have our things. We all have our things, I mean, we do. Look, at the end of the day, I'm not married. I have a boyfriend and he sleeps in my bed. That's not something I'm supposed to be doing, is it? But I do it every single day I can.
We all have our struggles.
We all have it. We all have it. And it is really just a matter of doing the best we can with what we're given and recognizing that there is a place we can go to pray to help us in the ways we need help as we learn, as we grow, as we evolve through God, right? Our goal is to learn. That's our life. That's our lifetime gig, and to help other people learn.
Yeah, you are so correct. And that's why I love that you have this podcast where you're having a stage for people to be able to share their stories and just to help others. Because like I said before, we are only here on earth as believers to grow the kingdom of God. That's the only purpose we are here for. Yep. And when we think of all these other things, the worldly, where we're like turning this way and turning this way, we're not looking up, that's where you're just going to feel kind of icky. And that's where the bad things start creeping in and the addictions start creeping in. And then you start to stray because the devil pulled you away from one little tiny, tiny thing. And it just kind of grew. So just being hyper aware of that. And a lot of people don't even think about like the Netflix episodes or even like speaking a curse word or using God's name in vain. Like I was literally reading the 10 Commandments this past week, and it hit me so hard of how the Lord said, whoever uses my name in vain, there are consequences from that. And even just saying, oh my God, I'm like, I need to stop saying that. That's not okay, because I'm using it in like a slang way that's not for the Lord. And he is holy. He's mighty. He's so powerful. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to really start saying, oh my gosh, instead of, oh my God, because that's just not, I'm using it incorrectly. That's the Lord's name is so holy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that you bring that up. It's in the details. It is totally in the details for sure.
Yeah.
So what else has been going on? What other things do you have to share with our listeners today as they're on their own journey trying to figure this life out?
Yeah. So I would love to share this Bible plan I've been using through, it's called the Daily Grace Company.
The
And
Daily
so I
Grace
read
Coming. And would you say it's a Bible plan?
it's a kind of, I would call it like a Bible study, I guess you could say.
Okay.
It's called Christ in All Scriptures, and there's 4 volumes of this. And it's a 52-week journey of discovering Jesus on every page of the Bible.
Okay.
And I've already done it about 3 months worth. Today's March 31st. So I just started the second book today. And it is so cool how every single piece of scripture in the Bible, in this big, fat, thick book,
Mm-hmm.
that every single piece of it points to Jesus. And I never thought of it that way. Like Bible stories, I'm like, oh, it's just a story. It's like about Moses or
Yeah.
about Noah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's all pointing to God. And so this is really drawing me so much closer to him. I recommend it for any of you that maybe have, done some Bible studies or you've read the Bible through and you're like, I want to dive deeper. This is what I'm doing this year. And I'm more than happy to share the link with you for them to get this. I by no way am making any kind of money off of this or anything. It's just, I love this study and want people to be able to experience what I'm experiencing. And it's just been so eye-opening to really like dive deep into scripture and to understand even deeper scriptures that you probably have read your whole life. Like, for instance, the 10 Commandments. I've read that so many times since I was a little kid. That's a story that's told to you in Sunday school. And it's really eye-opening about how the first half of the 10 Commandments is all about God and the things that we need to follow. And then the second half is all about interacting with people that are like, honor your father and mother, do not covet. And I was like, oh my goodness, I never realized how God put like the first half of this is all about, keeping the Sabbath day holy and loving the Lord your God and putting him first. It just little things like that are so eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful Bible study. And I love to read. So I'm always like diving into different books. I don't have any of the books that I'm reading sitting here in front of me. So I'm always like transitioning into different books. There's one that I'm now reading. It's something about like not hurrying through life because.
Oh, yeah. I think I gave you that book last time. The little orange book. Relentless Pursuit. What is it? Oh, goodness. It's in my head. That's what it is.
I think it's like the relentless.
I'm going to butcher it. The relentless pursuit of elimination of hurry.
Yes, that is the book I'm reading, and I just started reading it. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
and as an entrepreneur and as a mom, or just even like as a person with a career, we are always in a hurry. Like we're just rushing through life, and God did not intend that at all because we end up missing blessings from him when we're constantly in a hurry.
Yes, and that is definitely self-imposed and very human. For
sure. Yeah. Highly recommend that book if you're someone like me that's always on the go. It's like you got to slow down. Make sure to have that time with God and that prayer time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on with us again and finishing your story, because it's so important that everybody hear all of it and get the good lessons that you learned from this past weekend also. So I'm really grateful to have you back and just appreciate all of your insight and input. And listen, we're all here for you. So anytime you need, you let me know. Anytime you're struggling with anything. So
thank you, Angela. I appreciate you so much. You don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely, my dear. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to Evolve Through God, and we will catch you on the next episode.